will be and we'll have that up online for everybody to watch back later on. Everyone who attends tonight's meeting, we will send an email at the end, just confirming some of the stuff that we've talked about, giving you some materials that you might find useful. And we will have some time at the end for Q&As, just if there's anything that's not being covered in the presentation. Tonight, we've got Fiach Andrews and Lauren Au from the Membership and Development Department, and Conor Fadgen, who looks after governance. The guys are going to run through some slides covering different areas of the protocols and what you need to know, and some useful stuff that you might find supportive when you're getting your clubs back up and running. So I'm not going to talk anymore, and I'm going to pass it over to Fiach first, who's going to take you through some of the initial protocols.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks very much, David. So I'm going to discuss the key considerations around the protocols for coaches, players, and clubs as we return from June 7th. So I suppose just to give an overview of this phase of return to restricted play under the protocols. This phase permits individual training that is physically distanced, non-contact activity, completed in a predefined area, within a controlled environment, and without the sharing of equipment. And you'll see those key points alluded to throughout each of those protocol documents. So then, if we start with the clubs, and in terms of key considerations for return to club activity. So a lot of them are very similar to the protocols that would have been in place when this webinar was last delivered. So firstly, around appointing a COVID officer and nominating that COVID officer to Badminton Ireland. That's a requirement. Clubs must complete a BI risk assessment and again provide that. In terms of contact venue, ensuring compliance with protocols before reopening. An important one is to gather contact information of all members and have that up to date on the BI system. So that obviously goes if members need to be contacted due to being a close case of someone who may have been at the activities. In terms of club night scheduling and records, so players who are attending club nights should be notified in advance of the schedule of play for that evening. So what their arrival time will be, what their departure time will be, and the expectation would be that they arrive no more than 5 minutes before they're due to go on court, and then exit the venue as swiftly as possible post-play. In terms of cleaning and sanitizing, that is something that must be discussed with club venues and ironed out as to who is responsible for cleaning and sanitizing surfaces and equipment on those club nights. I suppose the main one that we have highlighted here is the full court singles only. So doubles in this phase is permitted with people from the same household. So it's full court singles only. I will touch on it again now under the coaching considerations. So in terms of if there's a coach delivering to two players, players must be on opposite sides of the courts. And then Conor will also talk to you about what a layout might look like with varying number of courts in the hall. Another one to watch out for within the protocols is that face coverings must be worn by all personnel when not playing on court. So that is I suppose earmarked throughout the protocols. Again, one parent per juvenile may attend activities. And just to be wary that the club is responsible for enforcing guidelines with members. So should someone step out of line, just a gentle reminder of what the protocols are and what the best practice is. So then in terms of the key considerations around coaches, so in this phase of restricted return to restricted play, coaches who are delivering activities must be a BI licensed coach. And similar to clubs, must develop and prepare risk assessments before going back to deliver coaching sessions. Permission must be requested from the club and the venue, and likewise, as with the clubs, they should liaise with the club and the venue in terms of the cleaning and the setup of protocols. Where coaches are responsible for cleaning and takedown of equipment, the coach themselves should take full responsibility and avoid, I suppose, getting players to assist on that front. And all payments should be, where possible, made online in advance of sessions. A few more considerations then on that front is that, and I alluded to it a small bit earlier on, so is that if coaching, a coach should have two players on opposite sides of the net, with the only exception to this being that if there are people from the same household. So you could have people from one household on one side of the court and people from another household on the opposite side of the court. The coach should enforce physical distancing throughout the practice, and face covering should be worn while coaching during this phase. Attendance record should be maintained once again in terms of contact tracing purposes, and coaching equipment should be limited as much as possible. So then, in terms of the key considerations for players, players should check with their GP in advance if they're in to see if they're in a high risk category. And again, it's the responsibility of all players and all members to ensure that their up-to-date contact details have been provided to their club. It's advised to stay at home if in one of the following categories. So if you're in high risk health category, have displayed COVID symptoms, have been abroad in the last 14 days, or have been in contact with someone who has had COVID in the last 14 days, then you are to stay at home from any activity. Pre-arrange court slot with the club, and players should travel alone to the venue, again with the exception that unless they're traveling with someone from the same household as themselves. And then my last slide, just before I pass on to Connor. So again, some more considerations on the playing front. As mentioned previously, arriving and leaving as close to the playing times, and as outlined in the schedule provided from clubs or from coaches. As much as possible to have consistent playing partners throughout this phase of return to restricted play. Again, it's everyone's responsibility to enforce the physical distancing is maintained throughout sessions, and to avoid sharing equipment. Refrain from excessive handling of the shuttle. So if involved in gameplay, to return the shuttle with the racket, and kit and equipment should be kept behind the court during singles games, so as opposed to being kept on the side of the court. And I suppose one point that's not there as well is that players should stay on the same side of the court while playing singles games. Mask must be worn in the venue and on a break from. Mask must be worn in the venue and when on a break from playing. So that's something that we touched on a small bit earlier on. Again, gentle reminders to others who may be in the facility if they're not adhering to any of the guidelines or the best practice. And then if someone should become unwell, they should contact their GP post-session. And they are my slides. So I'm just going to pass it on to Connor now, who's going to take you through the next phase of the protocols.
Yeah, thanks for that, Fiach. And if you have plenty of questions for Fiach, you can pop them into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen there. So just in terms of some of the key changes, I suppose, since the last time we delivered one of these webinars, the media spotlight has been on new variants lately, with the B117 variant and also the Indian variant as well. So I suppose the key issue with the variants is that it seems to be that they are more transmissible. So again, these are why the protocols are in place. It's simply reminding us that we have to be vigilant. We're in indoor spaces. So as much as we'd like to think that COVID-19 has gone away, unfortunately it's still here, but we can still do our best to mitigate risk as best as we can. In terms of ventilation as well, Sport Ireland have encouraged ventilation as much as possible. So again, I would place more importance probably previously than we have before in terms of allowing for fresh air to circulate through the building in between gaps of groups playing within a hall. As well as that, in terms of shuttles, we have, I suppose, changed the protocol around that, and it's just ensuring that players are sanitising their hands prior to coming into the venue, as they enter the venue, sorry, and also as they exit, and making sure to wash their hands. It's as simple as that. I know previously we had said around players playing only with their particular shuttle, so it has changed slightly, and we have probably more so relaxed that particular case. In terms of vaccines, obviously, it's welcome news, and we have had a few queries in terms of vaccinated players, people who have received their 2 doses of vaccines, and are they able to play? There's no sporting exemption available at present for vaccinated people. There has been a relaxation, I suppose, by government in terms of household visits, but that doesn't cross over into the sporting context as of yet. If there is any changes to that, we will be bringing them forward within our protocols in future times. Okay. In terms of the resources as well, we have updated them in line with the guidelines that we have published. So they are available to download on the Badminton Ireland website, and like David said earlier, just in terms of email, we'll send out the appropriate links for that for you to be able to access those. Okay. So again, in terms of the COVID-19 officer, it's just again to really highlight that it's not a position where you need a health and safety officer qualification or anything like that. It's necessary to monitor club activity, and the role description that we have provided is it's fairly exhaustive in terms of what the role is, and there's no limit to the amount of officers that you can have within your club. We obviously recognise that this is a challenge in itself, and we're there to support any people within your club who will take up this role or responsibility. It's simply a case of making sure that you're available throughout a session while there's people playing on court, and to be able to make sure that the guidelines are being practiced. Okay, that's essentially the role. And just to cover off where the training is available, so in terms of the resources, what we would advise clubs to do is, prior to getting back, obviously to promote for anyone planning on returning to play, to complete the Return to Sport e-learning course that Sport Ireland presently have on their website. Okay, so that's for players, coaches, any volunteers. It's a fairly straightforward e-learning course, and so it's click through and they'll receive a certificate at the end of that. And there is an additional module as well for COVID-19 officers if they wish to do that. Otherwise, there is the Badminton Ireland COVID-19 officer training, which we have available as well, and people are registered for that once they complete the online response form, which we'll touch upon later on as well. But also, they can sign up for that through the e-learning page that we have under the governance section of the website as well, where we also have a number of other trainings available too. Okay. And also, just in terms of the COVID-19 return to play risk assessment, okay, that document is available for download as a Word document. So it's pretty much straightforward. The possible actions taken by the club to mitigate the risk, we've pretty much outlined them there for you. So it's just to outline what action you have specifically taken within your club. So we've given you the possible actions, and then you can simply fill in what the actions are that you've taken to mitigate the risk and what's the likelihood of the risk after in terms of that possible action taken, and then just assign a responsibility. So it may be different COVID officers within your club that may take on that particular action within your risk assessment document as well. Okay, so if you need any assistance at any stage throughout in terms of the COVID-19 return to play risk assessment, please get in touch with me. There's no issues at all. We'll try our best to help clubs out in completing that document. And then obviously we'll be asking clubs to send that back into us. In terms of a one-court hall, with the current guidelines, this is what it may look like. Okay, so you'd have your parents sitting at the back. So the yellow, the purple people, and the red people will all be wearing face masks. They're indoors, they're not playing on court, and therefore they're the ones that should be wearing face masks. The coach is always keeping physically distant of the players. And again, it's just monitoring the entry and exit to the facility as well. Okay. In terms of a 3-court hall, in this case, it may seem a bit more challenging, but the concept is still the same. The coach is keeping physically distant, maybe coaching across, but again, keeping a physical distance from players, as well as that, obviously, your parents are maintaining their distance at the back of the court as well. Okay, if in the case of juvenile players. Just on this particular one, obviously, it becomes a bit more challenging in terms of what we'll touch on later on in terms of supervision of players leaving the facility. So what we'd be saying is the court nearest the exit would be emptying out first. Okay, your court 2 would be your middle court, sorry, would be emptying out second, and then the nearest court to the entry will be exiting third. And then obviously when the next group is filling in, they'll be filling up the court nearest the exit. Okay, I'm filling it up likewise. Okay. In terms of juveniles, okay, the same safeguarding principles apply. What we would say, it is an opportune time to review your child risk assessment and safeguarding statement. They were previously completed in 2019, so it is advised that they are renewed every 2 years as it is. So it's an opportune time just to make sure that you have those pieces in place. Again, updating them. There may be very little updates to make on them, but again, it's just to make sure that you have those children first pieces in place. In terms of vetting and safeguarding training, we have been very fortunate to be able to continue in terms of implementing and processing both. The vetting and safeguarding training process, they're outlined in a document under COVID-19 safeguarding guidelines. So in terms of vetting, it's simply a case of filling out section A of the ID verification form, complete with a copy of your ID and a copy of your proof of address, sending them into the safeguarding@badmintonireland.com email, and then we can issue a verification phone call just to make sure everything is correct and process the Garda vetting from there. Okay, so there's no issue in terms of vetting. Safeguarding training, we have delivered a number of safeguarding trainings online, and we will run further ones ahead, most likely at the start of the season, depending on the need. In terms of supervision, again, I've touched on it there, just in terms of entry and exit. If your exit is leading out onto a busy road or onto a busy car park, just be mindful, particularly in terms of children, and that they're not being let loose for obvious reasons out into those areas without some supervision, and making sure the parents and guardians are there to collect them. It's also important. Look, at this stage, children are well versed in terms of COVID due to the regulations they face within their schools, but just to induct them within the club, that it's the same rules that apply pretty much in terms of keeping physical distance and sanitizing, etc. Being clear with parents in terms of what's expected, because obviously it places a huge challenge on clubs, and we recognise this. So it's important that parents are kept in line with the communication coming out from your club, and making sure, as Fiach has alluded to earlier, in terms of making sure contact details are correct as well. So practical actions you can take ahead of returning to play include making sure that your venue provider is obviously available for play to continue within their hall. And again, making sure you've reviewed your COVID-19 risk assessment if you completed it last year, and if you haven't, obviously to get a start on it if you are interested in getting back to some form of club play at present. In terms of the disclaimer form or the Blockworks app, Lauren will go through the Blockworks app shortly in terms of how it works, and there's a number of resources that we've made available to clubs as well, just to make sure that it can be implemented fairly easily. But again, in terms of disclaimer forms, if you are having to use paper forms, again, it's just making sure that that you're being responsible in terms of how you manage those. And the next slide will just cover from a GDPR perspective. Online response form for clubs. Again, it's a case of just making us aware of who your COVID-19 officers are, and that you're satisfied with the guidelines and that you're able to implement them within your club. So some of the questions within that online response form include, have you conducted your COVID-19 risk assessment? Are you aware of the current guidelines? Fairly basic, straightforward questions, really. So communication with members, just on the protocols, because ultimately these are the people who will have to take a certain element of personal responsibility in terms of implementing them, and also just, again, making sure that there is that induction to players, because while juveniles and children can be very easily influenced, sometimes it's the adults that might take a bit of persuasion to make sure that that they're taking the necessary action to make sure that a return to play is safe. Again, just in terms of the GDPR, keeping a record of attendance, and again, I think that keeping a consistent flavor of people in terms of groups that you may be using within your club will assist with this and ease the workload that you feel there may be on your club. In terms of making sure contact details are correct, I think that's the third time we've mentioned it already. And again, confidentiality, storage and access, it really all pretty much relates to make sure that you're handling any data in the correct way, making sure it's safe, secure, and that it's only accessed by those who need to know. Okay, so again, your team of COVID officers, if that's the case, maybe that they're the people who are ultimately responsible for holding on to whatever information and making sure that it's stored securely. All right. I'm just going to see if we can get. So I'm just going to hand you over to Lauren now.
Thanks, Connor.
Just Lauren, just before you come on, there's a number of questions that have come in. Just to confirm, we'll get to those at the end. For anyone who's just wondering, we'll address those at the end of the presentation.
Okay. So Badminton, I need to. Connor, do I have the access for? Okay. So Badminton Ireland has developed an app called Block Rocks for contact tracing purposes. If your club has already have something similar for the same purposes, then it's fine as well. This is free for all registered club. It is not an actual app, so you can download from the App Store or the Play Store, but you can make the web page as an app icon on your homepage of your phone. The step for that is on the menu where you can find on the Badminton Ireland website. When you get onto the website, under the membership section, you can see a tab called Block Rock Contact Tracing. In there, you'll be able to find the link and the QR code for the app. Next page. Okay. So for the app itself, there are 2 sets of login details. The club secretary will have an admin one and the rest of the members will be using a different one. All members will be using the same one instead of individual ones with their own password. So let's say I'm the secretary of ABC Badminton Club, then I'll have a login like ABC admin, and the members will have another one like ABC BC. So if your club has done the club call with us before, you should already receive the login details for your club. But if you haven't, you can email me after this webinar and I will send it on to you. So there are a few things that an admin user can do, which are updating the members list, setting up the training sessions, registering players to the session, and if there's any need to get a report of the attendance record, you can filter the data and generate a report. Instead of members list, all the data is already set up for your club. All the names of the members should be there if they were a member for the 2019-2020 season. You can always do a quick check, and if there's anyone missing, you can just add them in. All the steps for all the functions are already in the user menu, where you can find on the same page that I just mentioned on the BI website. We have also upload some demonstration videos for that as well. So A few things to make sure that is that the club secretaries to set up the sessions and the players must log in and put the name down before they arrive at the hall. There are some COVID related questions when registering to the sessions. Club admins should go through the list and the answers and see if anyone should not come down to the hall before the session starts. We have also created a poster template you can see on the left here where clubs can just put in their club name, login username and password so it can circulate to your club members. But as I said, all the resources and demonstration are already up on the website. If you need any help or if you need the login details for your club, you can email me after the webinar. That's it for me.
Thanks, Lauren. Lots of information there for people to digest, and I'm sure some people might be thinking up questions or writing them in, but we've had a few come in so far, and the first three I'm going to address sort of as a bulk, and it's kind of looking at what is going to happen next and what are the next steps. As people are probably aware, there's an announcement due on Friday. We are not certain as to what that announcement will be. However, previous feedback and messages from the government and from Sport Ireland have all been pretty clear that a full return to indoor sport, including tournaments and competitions, would be considered for the month of July. Now, where exactly that falls in July, we've not had any clear guidance yet. But typically the way the government has managed this stuff so far is that usually restrictions are eased every 6 weeks. So we would expect maybe the second half to the end of July. Again, that's provided the figures stay positive. We don't have any second surges. It's not too long ago from last year when we were planning a return to the sport for last season. And of course, we all know how that went. So we have to take these things with a grain of salt and be cautious of the fact that if there's any surges or spikes or anything that gives pause to the government, some of this stuff might be delayed or worse, rolled back. However, things are positive at the moment. The vaccines are going well, so we're confident that we'll be able to maintain what we have, what we get from the 7th of June, and that we should progress to doubles play sometime in July. There was a set of protocols submitted to the government earlier this year as part of the indoor sports group. I submitted a set of protocols for the return to badminton. Doubles play was outlined, full return to juvenile play was outlined based on certain restrictions, and that is expected, I would hope, for June. So that's what we're looking at. Again, if there's any further information that we get internally prior to Friday's announcement, or maybe some clarifying information after Friday's announcement, we will publish that on the website for everyone to look at. Connor, I might ask you to take a few of those questions there. I think they're related to your presentation.
Hi, Roy. Good to see you like the smiley faces on the courts. I suppose, look, it's a case of being as practical as possible there, Roy. If you don't have different entries and exits, what alternatives can be used? What I would say is, look at the time gap between groups coming to your hall, whatever the case may be, and just making sure that there's an allowance that they're not going to be mingling outside your venue. I think that's the way we've worded it within the guidelines. You're essentially what you're trying to do is avoid mixing of groups. So I think that's probably the best solution you could have there, Roy, would be just be mindful of your time between groups. The next question is just looking. COVID officer has been selected last year and had training from e-learning provided by Badminton Ireland. Does the club COVID officer have to be trained again? I would say it'd be very worthwhile to refresh, because 12 months has been a long time, and for the most part, there's been very little activity on badminton courts. So if you do have a COVID officer and they're not sure essentially of the guidelines, which is what really their Bible should be, in terms of best practice and the protocols that we're trying to do, that essentially they should look to renew their training again. Okay, so Mary, so sorry if this has been already covered, but if a risk assessment was done for the last return to play, does it need to be redone? I did say, look, it's just a case of updating it, and no doubt it's a Word document, it'll be easily adjusted. and there may not be much change or any change to it, depending on what stage we're coming back. I think the last time we were looking at doubles play coming back, for example, and doubles play was allowed to be played. So that might need to be changed within your risk assessment, as an example. Okay.
There's a question there on whether people can play doubles if they wear face masks. At the moment, no. The sports expert group reviews all the protocols that we put forward, and they did not allow for the provision of face masks to be used while playing to mitigate risk. So for the time being, that is not an option, but obviously might be an option down the line, although we would hope that the next time we're reducing restrictions, doubles play in full will be allowed without face masks. There's a question here in regards to whether all 2019 or 2020 members are still insured. They are. The board took the decision towards the end of last year to extend the cover for all members free of charge for the entirety of the 2020-2021 season. So everyone will be covered as they would normally. So if people are looking to return in June to start playing badminton, you are covered under VI's insurance, provided you follow and adhere to the protocols that the guys have outlined today. I'll just take a couple of more of these, guys. There's expected full return to play would involve having had two vaccines. No, that's not the indication we're getting from government. As we can see, there's a lot of sports out there right now who've returned to full play. They are obviously outdoors, but they've all returned. And I believe that once there's enough vaccines out in the in society, that the government will be willing to allow indoor sports to return to full. As I said, that's the indication we've been given from the government, and we just have to wait and see if they hold up to what they've promised. But we would expect that by mid to late July we should see a return to full play as planned. At the moment, there is no expected earlier return for juvenile players. That again might change. We are continuously engaging with the sports expert group, and they continue to update their advice to us. But for now, it looks like we should get a full return to play for both juveniles and adults sometime towards the end of July. And I would hope that that timeline stays. Again, if we don't have any surges or any major changes that impact that should be the case. In terms of new players were not part of the provision. However, if clubs come to us and let us know that there's players, we will address that and see what we can do for them. Our goal really is not to restrict play. Our goal is to get as many of our members back up playing as possible. So if there are people new to a club who are interested in joining the club and they're looking to try it out or come down and play, if you just contact the office just so we can check their details and make sure that's all okay on our end, then that should be fine. Connor, do you want to take the last one?
Yeah, so again, Mary, just in terms of any suggestions for clubs who own their premises and are open for bookings via booking system 7 days per week in terms of having COVID officers present. I'd imagine generally there would be someone present within the facility. So we'd be satisfied so long as there's someone present who understands what the COVID guidelines are. And again, it's a case really of having personal responsibility pushed back on those people and making sure that they understand what the guidelines are. There's guidelines specifically set out for players. And I mean, as much as we can have a webinar here this evening, it's ultimately down to people to make sure that they're acting within the guidelines. So I think so long as the facility is making sure as much as possible that players are aware that they need to sanitize going onto court, avoid excessive handling of shuttles, sanitizing on the way out of the court, and not staying around and mingling with other groups or anything like that. I think that's probably as much as you can do, Mary. And just one more question there, David.
Yeah, there's a question on juveniles return to play on the 7th of June if playing with family. Juveniles can return to play badminton in line with the protocols. So they can play singles badminton or they can play doubles provided it's with a member of the same household. There has been some questions put out generally in sport, the why juveniles can't return to full sport, indoor sport, when they are now back at school mixing. The Taoiseach has answered that on a number of occasions, and has been clear that while children are back at school in the school pods, so to speak, they don't all play in the same sports clubs. So by allowing children to mix in sports clubs, you're effectively allowing cross-contamination between schools. So they've not allowed that at this point. But juveniles can return to play badminton in line with the protocols that we've outlined here tonight. And I think that's it for the questions. I don't know if there are any further questions. Yeah. Sorry, there's one there in terms of competitions. Yeah, we are hoping that competitions will return by autumn. Again, the government's indication to us is that a full return to indoor sport and tournaments and competitions would be considered in July. Now, it'll depend on where we are by the time we get to July, but we are expecting that by the middle to the end of July, we'll be able to get back to full badminton indoors and some competitions. If there's some bit of a delay in that, there might be, but I wouldn't expect it to stretch all the way into autumn. But we'll have to wait and see. It'll depend on the figures and how they pan out over the next couple of weeks. I'll just give it another minute or two if anyone has any other questions they want to ask. Just while people are possibly typing those out, I will just thank the guys for their time tonight. They've put those protocols and the update on those protocols together quite quickly. We are continuing to engage with Sport Ireland and the Sport Expert Group. Like I said, we have put protocols in front of them. We are very hopeful for a return to full indoor sport by July. Possibly end of July, but still by July, which is better than a lot of other indoor sports. But we do appreciate that it's been a long time since people have been able to get back playing. And I would say that over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be putting out a lot of other resources, not related to the protocols, but related in terms of getting your club back up and running, getting back on court for the first time as part of a campaign that we're going to be running in the lead into the new season. So keep an eye out for that. There should be more useful stuff that you can use in your own club or you can pass on to your own members. And I suppose if there's no other questions, then I will thank everybody for coming. And as I said at this outset, Lauren's going to circulate an email at the end with some of the details. And we will put this webinar up on our YouTube in the coming days. Okay, thank you very much.